Yeah, and it's interesting that they say in here, in the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on the military campaigns. He's like,
Yeah.
you've really been king this whole time,
Yeah.
and we've known that, but now we're making it official.
Yeah, and I think this is important because as we foreshadow David's later life,
Yeah,
the thing that, like, we go back to one of the first things we read about when Saul really starts to hate David.
yeah,
It was because David was seen as the military hero.
yeah. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Yeah.
Right. It was really important that the king was seen as the strong leader of the army.
Welcome back to the Physics of Faith podcast. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Tim.
And we are continuing our series on the life of David. Normally we would just say the chapter. I've actually lost track of how many weeks we're going now. Is this week 6 or week 7, I think now? I can't even remember.
Numbers aren't real.
So obviously, as we've talked about, not obviously going chapter by chapter, verse by verse through the life of David, but, skipping through things. And so we're continuing our story on just the life of this incredible character, incredible man, David, who as we're starting to get into some of seeing some of David's failings. The first several weeks were about how wonderful David was and is, and we're entering this time where you start to see, and obviously he's not perfect, and we'll talk today a little bit, talk in these next couple weeks about, we've already seen a few things that he did wrong, where he erred, that we didn't go into great detail on, but obviously things really start to change, and so. Where we left it off last time, basically Saul and Jonathan, they were killed and defeated by the Philistine armies, and David, right? I said that, yeah. Sorry, I had a little momentary of like, wait, is that right? No. But David is very mournful of this because this isn't how he wanted it to end for them. This isn't how he wanted to end for Saul. Obviously, he's very distraught about the loss of his good friend Jonathan.
Yep.
And yeah, so that's kind of where we left off. So again, there's so much to go through the life of David that we can't go necessarily chapter by chapter or verse by verse. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We're going to skip from 2 Samuel chapter 2. We're going to skip ahead to 2 Samuel chapter 5. So just very briefly, I want to do a little recap of 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 8 through 32, and then chapters 3 and 4. Basically, long story short, Saul dies, and so we know David is the coming king of Israel this whole time, right? Well, he doesn't become king of Israel right away. So Ishbosheth was made king after Saul's death, was one of Saul's other children. That obviously Jonathan was obviously the main guy we talked about, but he was another one of Saul's sons, and so he was made king of Israel. Now, David was anointed king over Judah.
Yeah.
And Judah was very loyal to David. And so what ends up happening is that basically David's family and David's line wars with Ishbosheth and Saul's family and Saul's line for many years. They kind of war together for many years, and they fight. And so Abner, who is one of the people on Ishbosheth's side, things happen there. Won't go into all the details. Some stuff happens there. He leaves Ishbosheth. He joins David's side. He ends up getting, Abner does, he ends up getting murdered by Joab. Yeah. And then Ishbosheth ends up getting murdered. And basically this gets the man out of the way and clears the path for David to become king of Israel. And David mourns this. He mourns the death of Abner, and he mourns the loss of Ishbosheth, even though he was in his way. Yeah. He was like, this isn't how this was supposed to go. He wasn't happy about Saul dying, and obviously he wasn't about this because he was a man of great character, and he knew what was right and what was wrong, and so it's like, this isn't how this was supposed to be. And so he mourned, and he was upset about all that. And so now we are caught up to chapter 5, where David finally will become king of Israel.
Yeah.
Anything to add or mention there?
No, I think David is a interesting guy with how he deals with Saul and Saul's family.
Yeah.
You know?
And we'll see that in a couple weeks here about he did some very interesting things. But
Yeah. He's got some different ways he takes things on, and I feel like he put so much importance on the fact that Saul was the first king of Israel.
Right.
And I think that's really where this all stems from. David's actions, David's respect, it's all about trying to do right by God.
Right.
It's not that he necessarily just loved Saul.
Yeah.
Right. And granted, he met Saul when he was young. He probably did have some, like looked up to him. This is the king of Israel. But like even on the battlefield against Goliath, it wasn't about you insulted Saul.
Right.
It was you insulted the Lord our God.
Yeah.
You don't get to do that, right?
Yeah.
David was always, and when he doesn't kill Saul, his attitude about that was Saul is God's anointed.
Yeah.
I can't do something. And I think we're going to see more of this attitude of David as we continue on. Almost to the point where he gets like kind of that fear of like analysis paralysis almost, right? In some situations. And in other situations, he goes full tilt and is out there. You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how this story continues. And so I guess we're going to jump into 2 Samuel chapter 5.
Yes, 2 Samuel chapter 5, and we'll read first just verses 1 through 5 to get started. So just as we mentioned, I read out of the NIV. It's what I've grown up with. You normally do out of the NASB. Read whatever works for you.
Yeah.
All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, 'You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler.' When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years."
Okay.
So, David is finally made king of Israel after about 15 years of training. You know, we know that, Samuel anoints him when he was between 10 and 15 years old. And so he's known for many, many years that, he's the future king of Israel. That's his calling. But obviously a lot of things got in the way. Things didn't go right. But after much training and preparation, David is finally anointed king of Israel.
Yeah. Yeah. Hebron is where he was initially kind of anointed.
Yeah.
When he was like 23.
Right.
So he was pretty young. When we think about how much time he served under Saul, he was pretty young. And we saw that kind of natural separation of Israel and Judah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But but now everybody comes to him and they're like, "Look, you're the guy, we get it."
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they say in here, in the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on the military campaigns. He's like, you've really been king this whole time, and we've known that, but now we're making it official.
Yeah, and I think this is important because as we foreshadow David's later life, the thing that, like, we go back to one of the first things we read about when Saul really starts to hate David.
Yeah.
It was because David was seen as the military hero.
Yeah. Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. Yeah.
Right. It was really important that the king was seen as the strong leader of the army. Right. That was really, really important. And so they knew that about David. They knew he was the one who got stuff done.
Yeah.
And while Saul was sitting at home listening to the harp, trying not to throw spears at people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I said earlier, when I was kind of introducing this, the line to the throne had finally been made clear. There were a lot of things that got in the way and didn't work out the way it was supposed to, but God in his infinite power and wisdom, he made it right and he worked it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's jump into we'll do real quick verses 6 through 8 here. The king and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They thought, "David cannot get in here." Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, which is the city of David. On that day, David had said, "Anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind, who are David's enemies. That is why they say the blind and lame will not enter the palace." So this is kind of the one of the, obviously we think of, even today, we think of Jerusalem as the holy city, the city of David, the capital of Israel. That is the place. And so this is kind of where that all begins.
Yeah.
This is really, I mean, it's not the first mention of Jerusalem, but it is one of the first mentions of Jerusalem in the Bible. And it's, as we understand, it was a fairly easily defended city, based on kind of its location, where it was, the geography of it, and so it was fairly easily defended. And the Jebusites here are way overconfident. For a couple reasons. But as we know and as we've seen, anytime David goes to war and sets his mind on something, he completes it. Obviously, because God is on his side. And David takes the city fairly simply.
Yeah, it's the Jebusites, I think, are first mentioned in Exodus 3:8. So these are some of the people who are inhabiting the land of Canaan, right? Yeah. They're descendants of Ham, I believe.
Yeah.
And like the rest of the people of Canaan, God's judged them and he's condemned them because not just because they're idolaters, but because of the type of worship they do and the type of pagan practices that they practice.
Yeah.
God sees this as abhorrent and he's given them all this time. Now, they're mentioned in Exodus.
Yeah.
We see them in Judges. We see them in Joshua. Like, they've been around for a minute.
Yeah.
Right? And they've not been defeated. In fact, Judges 1:21 tells us that the Benjamites were supposed to dislodge them from Jerusalem, but couldn't. And couldn't quite get them. So they ended up kind of almost even dwelling amongst them. They really got absorbed in some ways in different places. But they still had this stronghold in Jerusalem. And I think it is interesting, and it might just be coincidental. It might be the way God lines things up. But the fact that the Benjamites were supposed to defeat the Jebusites, and couldn't, and it was Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin, and it was David who ultimately overthrew them. I don't know. There's something about that just feels poetic to me a little bit. But I like here. It's kind of interesting. They tease David. They make fun of him. They tell him you're not going to be able to take the city. And then
the lame and the blind can defend us from
yeah. And I'll be honest. I don't know that I'm understanding his retort very well personally. But he's basically well, where are those lame and blind folks that were going to defeat me? Essentially,
right?
You know.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump forward to we'll go 9 verses 9 through 16. David then took up residence in the fortress and called it the City of David. Mm-hmm. He built up the area around it from the terraces inward, and he became more and more powerful because the Lord God Almighty was with him. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent envoys to David along with cedar logs and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a palace to David. Then David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and had exalted his king for the sake of his people Israel. After he left Hebron, David took more concubines and wives in Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to him. These are the names of the children born to him there: Shemua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Japhiah, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphelet. I probably should have double-checked on the pronunciations of those, but that's what we're going with.
Yeah.
So basically, as normally happens, David easily conquers the city, and he basically takes up residence there, makes it the capital of it. Basically, becomes the capital of Israel. It's basically where he is this is where we're gonna build out from here. This is kind of our home base here.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I just got sidetracked because I didn't really take in those names, but then when you were reading them, you said Nathan.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken here, Nathan is the prophet.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So this, so he's going to become important later on.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think, they take Jerusalem. It immediately becomes the capital city, right?
Yeah.
Because as you pointed out before, it's well fortified. It's easily fortified.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I found really interesting here was Hiram, the king of Tyre,
Yeah.
and how he sends all this stuff
Yeah.
to build David a palace. And like we see this is that Hiram kind of had an admiration for David
Yeah.
and wanted to be a ally for the Israelites.
Yeah.
And would eventually like even be friends with Solomon as well.
Yeah. Well, he's probably, I mean, obviously he's a pretty smart guy because he knows that you don't want to be on David's bad side.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, and in verse 10 it talks about he became more and more powerful because the Lord God Almighty was with him.
Yeah.
Over and over, the Bible makes it that very clear. Like, David was a good person. He was a very powerful man. But there was a reason. It wasn't because David was so great, but was because God was with him. In every one of his battles, all the thousands that David slayed was because God was with him, because God made it possible. But yeah, I think that's So you bring up an important point there. That he really wanted. I mean, so we talk about how David was very multi-talented. He was very musical. He was a great warrior. He was a tall, good-looking guy, but he was also a good politician, if you will. I mean, to create this ally with these other folks there's a lot to that, and especially in that time, because I mean, land was land, and allies were allies, and enemies were bad, and you again did not want to be on David's good side and bad side, and so. To have this type of influence over other people and to be able to so quickly get this type of influence and this type of gift and things from another king in the area really shows David's obviously power and his influence and his wisdom.
Yeah. I like here too, like after Hiram sends these things over, it says David knew. It says, and David knew that the Lord had established him king over Israel and that he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people, Israel.
Yeah.
I feel like David took that kind of as like a sign. And now there was like a kingdom, like you were talking about this earlier. Everything was all the distractions were finally taken away.
Yeah.
Saul's family's gone. So there's nobody trying to kill him. They're building a palace. Other people are recognizing him as the king, and not just like as a song and being like, oh, is he the actual king?
Right.
But they're sending him gifts, and they're sending him masonry, and they're helping him build his fortifications. But like as you pointed out, David became greater and greater, for the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him in verse 10. But then in verse 12, when he says he knows that God established him. David knows he didn't do this on his own.
Right.
And he knows that it's not for his own sake, it's for the sake of the people of Israel.
Right.
It has not. David does this better than I think anybody in the scriptures. I mean, there's some people around that model this really well, but David is just one of those that does not take credit for any of his success or any of the things, any of his accolades. It's not about who he killed or who he conquered or what wars he prevented or any of that. It's not even about like establishing, I'm the one who established the house of the Lord, any of those things. It's all about, what does God want?
You're right.
And what does God want to do? And that's what I want to pursue. And it doesn't matter if it's me or if it's my son or whoever does it. Somebody is going to do it. Lord, what's my part in that?
Right.
And that is something that I think in a modern sense, a lot of us struggle with is we want to be King David without being King David.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we want to have the story about us instead of being content with being a small part of the story.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yep. No, I think you're absolutely right. So, so in verse 13, it says after he left Hebron, David took more concubines and wives in Jerusalem.
Right.
So we know to this point that David, we've said a lot of good things about David, but we know that he's not perfect.
Right.
And in a couple weeks we're going to talk about one of David's greatest failures, and that's him and Bathsheba.
Right.
We'll talk about that in a few weeks. And so we often look at that as an isolated incident, like that was where he really messed up. But his excuse me, his sexual impurity sin became long before that, and this is a sign of it. He took more wives, and he had already had multiple wives at this point. And I do kind of want to maybe take just a very brief pause. And we were talking about this in our men's group a while back about the Old Testament. There's so many men that have multiple wives, and so when did it stop? When did it not be okay to not have multiple wives? And really, the truth is, well, it never was okay to have multiple wives.
Right.
God never ordained that or allowed that or wanted that. Mm-hmm. But he allowed it to happen, one, because at the time, women who weren't married really didn't have a whole lot of options. I mean, getting married was a woman's way of survival,
Yeah.
And obviously we'll talk more about this later when we get to Bathsheba, but and so we see here like the God, I can't even remember her name now. We just talked about it, I think, a couple weeks ago. Woman, David, there's a man there, and David's like, they could have killed the man and everything, but the woman's like, no, let me protect you, and then that guy ends up dying, and then he takes her. And again, I completely forgot her name now, but
is it Abigail?
Yes, I think it was Abigail. And so David has taken multiple wives to this point, which is not something God wanted.
Yeah. Well, it does feel like in each instance he does it out of duty,
right,
to a degree, and so, and the ones that we've seen so far, right?
Yeah, right.
There's an element of duty, but I think it also speaks to man's continued desire to do things on their own and not trust God,
right?
Right. Like we see that with Abraham. Abraham has infidelity because he doesn't trust God,
right?
Right. He has to figure out how to trust God to have a child with his wife. We look at somebody like David, and we think about when Samuel goes to the people of Israel and they're like, we want a king.
Yeah.
Right. And God's kind of like, it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
This isn't a good thing. Right. And I think the Israelites kind of push back on Samuel and they're like, yeah, but everybody else has a king.
Yeah.
Well, guess how other kings did things?
Right.
They had multiple wives. They had Israel. This was not God's intent. This was not God's plan. This was not his desire. And an expression that I've heard about this before is everything in the Bible, not everything in the Bible is prescription. Some of it is description, right? So when we see that David had multiple wives, it doesn't put a stamp of approval on that.
Right.
It simply tells us David had multiple wives.
Yeah.
It tells us in many other places, including the Ten Commandments, that that's wrong.
Yeah. I mean, when you look back in scriptures and you see all of the guys that had multiple wives, it does not go well for them.
No, it doesn't.
it causes a lot of problems for them.
Right. And not in the goofy, home improvement way of like, wives are so much trouble.
Yeah. It's like, oh, man, the problem with having three wives, you got three mother-in-laws. Yeah, that's not what we're talking about here.
Right. Right, exactly. Because God tells us that a wife is a blessing. A wife is a good thing, right? But you ruin that when you bring something else into that relationship, right? So, this is where we really see, David is kind of allowing himself to do things that are not the way God would have him do things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It is interesting to me that like as we continue through 2 Samuel 5, like anytime David goes to war, he's like, what should we do? Should we go to war? Should we not go to war? Do I attack here or do I not attack here, right?
Well, and we'll see that here in a couple verses for sure.
But when it comes to women, he's not like, Lord, should I marry her? Should I not marry her?
Yeah.
Could he have provided for Abigail without making her his wife?
Yeah.
Right? Also, I think there's the question, too, is just because she's his wife, does that mean that she's in a relationship with him?
Right.
Does that make sense? Like, so is there a way that as a king he could have just taken care of her
Right.
and protected her? And I think that's what, when we get to the New Testament, this is what kind of Paul is telling us with widows.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Take care of them. Let their families step up first,
Yeah.
but then take care of them. He didn't say marry them.
Right.
Right? Like don't assign them to be the second wife of somebody else.
Yeah.
He is getting us back to God's intent around these things and saying, take care of people. You don't have to fill these systems to do that.
Right. Yeah, and this is in direct violation of a command that God had given decades before this when he's talking about Israel back in Deuteronomy. And I just want to read this real briefly. So I'll start actually in verse 16. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself or make the people return to Egypt or get more of them. For the Lord has told you, you are not to go back that way again. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. So this is back in Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
When God is talking to the Israelites about going into Israel and what that's going to look like. And here we are years later, and we will see David does both of these things.
He does. Yeah. Yes, he does.
Yeah. So again, obviously this is a story of David. And I mean, we see this now. Like, men can be great at so many great things.
Yeah.
But the lusts of the flesh can so often take you off course. And how many times have we seen that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is also something to, like, first of all, we should fight sin.
Yeah.
We should run from sin, like was it Joseph did. We should run from it. We should fight against it, stay away from it, all of those things. We should also not torment ourselves for the sins we have committed, right? Or for the imperfections that we have. Yeah, we need to strive to do better. Yes, we need to have correction. Yes, we need to have repentance. We need all of those things. But if you're out there today and you're like, well, I've been living in sin, I can't do anything for God because I've been living in sin.
Yeah.
David is the example here. David led all of Israel and was called the man after God's own heart.
Right.
While also having these sins and having these issues in his life.
Living in sin with all of these. Yeah.
Right. And so we'll dive into more as we continue his story, like some of the ways that he did repent or didn't repent in different ways. But we see his heart is always to be pleasing to God, even though he fails.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's jump in. Let's finish this chapter. We'll do verses 17 through 25 through the end of the chapter. And this is chapter 5. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they went up in full force to search for him. But David heard about it and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands?" The Lord answered him, "Go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands." So David went to Baal Perazim, and there he defeated them. He said, "As waters break out, the Lord has broken out against my enemies before me." So that place was called Baal Perazim. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. Once more the Philistines came up and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, and he answered, "Do not go straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in front of the poplar trees. As soon as you hear the sounds of marching in the tops of the poplar trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army." So David did as the Lord commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. Mm-hmm. So, you just mentioned a few minutes ago, every time that David went to war, every time there was a battle to be fought or whatnot, David always inquired of the Lord first. What should I do here? Mm-hmm. Should we attack these? Should we let them be? And, he hears, the Philistines, David has a history with the Philistines.
Yes, he does, yeah.
Goliath was a Philistine. He was kind of the head of the Philistines, not head of the Philistines, but right. And so long history there. And
he also worked for the Philistines for a minute too. Yeah,
right, exactly. And so he hears that they hear that David is the king over Israel now, and so they're getting up in arms about that. And he's like, "Well, God, what should I do about that?" God tells him, "I said, he says, do what you've done against them."
Yeah.
And this is another part of the Bible that that is not comfortable. And obviously, in the time, I think this is prescient, and in the time that we are in now, and some of the things that our president has said, and some of the things that the Pope has said, war is not something that we want.
Right.
And so it sounds like God is ordaining war here, and God is wanting war. But we also have to understand that these people were not. God made a covenant with David, and he made a covenant with the people of Israel.
Right.
And these people were in the way, and they were not honoring God.
Well, we talked about this with the Jebusites a little bit. And the Canaanites and those in Canaan, including the Philistines, their sins were great.
Yeah.
Right? We're not just talking about, these were just people that were out living their lives, right?
Yeah.
They were murdering babies.
Yeah.
Like, that was their way of life. That's what they were doing. And they were, like, sacrificing them to their gods.
Yeah.
And in brutal and horrific ways. They did not have a good society.
Yeah.
Like, we just spent like a couple minutes talking about the way David shouldn't have had all these wives, but how like God was kind of moving his people towards a way to respect women and protect women, right? Why does God need to move people towards that? Because the people around the people of God don't have any of that.
Right.
However much you look at the Bible, I hear this claim, and we've done a podcast on this before about like the misogyny of the Bible.
Yeah.
It is night and day better than the way the people of Canaan treated their women.
Yeah.
Right. So like when we think about these things, it wasn't like these peaceful villagers just hanging out. These people were doing awful things.
Right.
And they were doing awful things in the name of false gods. And they were doing them against the true God. And they did it for over 400 years. Mm-hmm. So when God says, all right, Israelites, Hebrews, you're going to go in there and you're going to wipe them out.
Yeah.
A few things we have to understand is God used some hyperbolic language, but his desire was for a total defeat of these cultures.
Yeah.
That would so brazenly hurt his people. Not just his chosen people, the Israelites, but his people, all of mankind, right? Yeah. And so, like, when we look at that, we know that God's not just like, a war over here would be good.
Yeah.
This was judgment. This was divine judgment, and he used the people of Israel and the Hebrew people to bring that judgment about.
It's a reminder of how much God hates sin.
Yeah.
I mean, when there were civilizations that were doing these things and God called them, go up and attack them. Mm-hmm. He literally said, clean house.
Yeah.
I mean, everything. I mean, this is after God literally destroyed the entire world,
right?
Because the world was so far away from him, except for Noah and his family. He literally cleaned house, and this is how much God hates sin,
right?
And this is how important the death of Christ that we just celebrated over Easter and his resurrection, a few weeks ago, is in that. Yes, God still hates sin just as much as he did then. But the debt has been paid for those things.
Absolutely. And then one other thing I would just mention about this with the Canaanite folks, I think it would be incredibly naive to assume that the Canaanites were going to accept these sojourners or these immigrants of the Israelites who came from Egypt, right?
Yeah.
They were going to enslave them, murder them, and do horrible things to them.
Yeah.
That was their way. That was their intent. So when they move into the land, it's not like they were all ready to have peace. David goes out and fights the Philistines. Why? Because the Philistines come out to fight him.
Right.
Right? Like their way was war as well. And their desire was to conquer their enemies. And God defeats them, not David.
Yeah, I mean, in verse 17 it says, talk about the Philistines. They went up in full force to search for him, meaning David. But David heard about it and went down to the stronghold. He said, shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands? That's what David asked. And God says, go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about this passage.
This isn't David just being warlike to be warlike.
Right. He goes to the stronghold because he knows he needs to defend his people.
Right.
But then it's like, but should I go out to battle?
Yeah.
Right. Because we can defend from the walls if we need to.
Yeah.
But one of the things I love about this passage is when God defeats the Philistines and they run off, they leave all their idols behind.
Yeah.
And I love this because of that phrase, there are no atheists in the foxhole, right?
Right.
Well, what's the first thing the Philistines abandoned?
Yeah.
Their gods,
Yeah.
right? Because David's God, our God, was mightier and stronger and was routing them at every turn.
Yeah.
And so they abandoned their idols. The idols were nothing more than good luck charms, and there was no luck there.
Yeah. And again, we're talking a lot of great things about David, but remember what we've read verse in 17. Don't take a bunch of wives and don't accumulate a bunch of silver and gold. And the Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off.
Yeah.
Didn't destroy them.
Right.
Didn't get rid of them. Carried them off and says, "Hey, look what we got now.
Yeah.
Not only do we got all these dead Philistines, we got all this stuff now."
We got all these golden idols. Yeah. And I think that, I don't know if we're going to discover what he does with them, but like if you're not melting those down and doing something noble with that, then you're just asking for trouble.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, just finishing up the chapter. This just shows how God was behind all of this, and God was with all this. David inquired of the Lord. He answered, "Do not go straight up, but circle around them." I mean, he's literally giving them battle plans.
Yeah.
He's saying, when you hear the sound in the poplar trees, that's when you go. And God he's literally. David wasn't the leader of this battle. Clearly, God was.
Yeah.
David was following God.
Yeah. And God was present in the battle, and God was there making the plans. I think that's something for us. Like many of us are not fighting wars today, but at least not like this. Those who are in the military and who are going off to war, trust God.
Yeah.
Put Him in charge of your heart, and do your best in those scenarios. But remember in your daily life that God is present in your battles.
Yeah.
God is present, and He has a strategy. He has a plan. And what we really need to focus on is hearing God and recognizing His voice.
I heard an amazing speaker a couple years ago. He was basically a military leader in one of the early Gulf Wars, basically. And basically, long story short, they had saved some of their own. They had gone out and they had to go back and there were basically other Americans, soldiers that were kind of in a problem, and so they need to go in and fight the enemies here and save these guys. And basically they're driving these trucks, and he saw guys get shot right next to him. And they were able to make it, and they got out. They got him. And then they got a call over the radio that says, "Hey, you got to go back. There's more." Oh. And so he went back, and he was telling it he was like, "I'm probably going to die today." He was just resigned to that fact, but he was a follower of Christ, and he's like, God's got me here, and this is what He's called me to do, And he was after it was all, he lived. It was a very successful mission. Afterwards, everybody was like, "Why were you so calm?" They're like, "What are you talking about?" Like he was talking over the radio, like everybody else is freaking out and yelling, blah, blah, blah. And he's over the radio just like, "We need this, boom, 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 boom," and he's very calm, cool, and collected. And he's like, he knew it wasn't him.
Yeah.
It was God leading him. And he explained that to those guys. Like, it wasn't me. It was God leading me in this battle. And that's why I survived, and that's why we lived, and that's why we were able to do this, because I was being led by God.
Yeah. It's a great testimony.
Yeah. And I wish I remembered his name, but I can't remember his name. I would tell you because I'm sure I'd love to tell you to go and buy his book, but I can't remember his name. But anyway, so that is 2 Samuel chapter 5. Anything else to add?
No, I think it was great.
All right. We will be back in a few weeks, and we're actually going to pick up right here when we're back.